Banning the use of phones while at work sometimes makes sense, but it might also cue malicious compliance. We'll get into that story in just a bit, but first, stop wasting ingredients. Years ago, I worked as a laborer in a food production company, kind of a mom-and-pop size productions distribution facility. We made all types of foods and sauces. One of the more mundane steps to a particular sauce was opening and emptying large cans of tomato sauce into a large mixer. Pretty simple, just open, pour, and toss the can. One of the higher-ups decided we were wasting a lot of the sauce by not thoroughly cleaning out each can. We're talking probably 20 to 30 ounces of tomato sauce per batch, which was probably around 2 to 3% waste. I get it, every cent counts. The problem was, the solution they came up with was to use these rubber spatulas to clean out the extra sauce from these metal cans. It didn't take a scientist to see that this would not work out well, with the cans being sharp and cutting into the rubber, leading to rubber going into the sauce. I tried voicing concerns but was shut down. I assume they just thought we were lazy and didn't want the extra work. So we do as we're told and start cleaning the cans thoroughly. Sure enough, about 10 cans in, we notice our spatulas missing large chunks of rubber. I hand one of the spatulas to my supervisor and he takes it to his boss. On cue, he comes back about 2 minutes later and says, "Don't worry about scooping out the cans anymore." That was my first taste of maybe being a manager doesn't mean you have all the answers. Well, OP just said it themselves. Reasoning was valid. The execution clearly wasn't thought out very well. And yeah, you gotta come out with another way to scrape that 2 to 3% of tomato sauce out, other than using rubber spatulas. Avid Learner Bot commented, "That feeling when you realize someone in authority is completely oblivious to basic operational realities, and you're just left to watch the inevitable happen. Like, really, it's incredible how some people just don't grasp fundamental things." Also, hey everybody, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these malicious compliance videos, it would be so nice and awesome if you liked the video, comment it down below if you're listening to our podcast. Now then, our next story is, show up 30 minutes early. Sure, Dave, as long as you do too. I'm 15 years old and work as a soccer referee. I will normally arrive 10 to 15 minutes early to a game, which is plenty of time to check in players from both teams and make sure the field is in proper playing condition. One game I showed up to, as an assistant referee, AR, my center ref, 18 years old, let's call him Dave, told me that all refs have to arrive 30 minutes early to every game. I know this is not true and stayed silent. We ref the game as usual and returned to where we put our stuff at the end of the game. Dave told me that because I didn't arrive 30 minutes early, he would mark that I didn't show up, basically telling me that I wouldn't get paid for the game we just worked. I complained that this was a rule that he made up. He left the game without saying anything else, figuring that would be all. Note, if you referee without any ARs, you get paid like $5 more. I think this was Dave's plan. When I got home, I made sure to sign up to be a center referee at every game where Dave was an AR. Poor Dave showed up to his next game 15 minutes early, which is absolutely unacceptable. I said nothing the whole game, but only marked him absent, which means he wouldn't get paid. This went on for a week and a half until his paycheck came in, and he was about $120 off what his total should have been. I did make sure every game that Dave was less than 30 minutes early. Dave emails one of the main referees, who runs everything, to see what the problem was. One of the main referees, let's call him John, told Dave that he wasn't there, so he wouldn't get paid. Dave put 2 and 2 together and realized what I did. Emails were sent between Dave, John, and I until John had the full story. Dave was fired for making up rules, and I got paid for the first game with Dave. Don't take advantage of young people. Take that, Dave. Edit. Don't take advantage of people, not just young people. That edit at the end, certainly appreciated. Don't take advantage of people in general, but I mean, this is just a case of back and forth pettiness of two teenagers. That's the way that I view it. Dave shouldn't have made up these rules, being on a power trip as the older guy in the group, I guess, and it is what it is. So hopefully lesson learned all around and you can move on and make your money elsewhere. Our next story is, no problems, just look in your textbook. About 15 years ago, I was almost 20 and in my country's equivalent of a trade school for electricians. One of our teachers, electronic circuits class, had a kind of annoying catchphrase for every question students had. No problems, just look in your textbook. He had already mentally checked out since he got a way better job lined up for next semester, so he pretty much only read stuff from the textbook and then switched to the textbook's practical exercises, where we had a breadboard and, working in pairs, inserted resistors, capacitors, and other components in it. All in all, not the worst teacher we had, but this one incident made his class very memorable. On the third class we had with that teacher, first one was introduction, second one was how to read resistor color codes, he said his catchphrase no less than 5 times per class. My friend showed me a glaring mistake in the textbook's practical exercise. It was something very simple, placing 3 resistors in series, measuring the current produced with a 24-volt DC power supply, and comparing to the value we had calculated. The first 2 exercises were okay, but in the third one, the values for all resistors were way too low, like 3 orders of magnitude low. Somebody meant to write 10K, but typed 10 instead, for every single resistor in that exercise. For people who are not very familiar with electronics, Ohm's law dictates that, for a constant voltage supply, current gets higher as resistances get lower. Voltage equals resistance times current, or V equals RXL, which can also be written as I equals V over R. Joule's law dictates that more power, which in a resistor's case would be dissipated as heat, is supplied the higher is the current. Power equals resistance times current squared, or P RXL squared. Resistors have a power rating measured in watts, and when the rating is exceeded, they start to produce smoke and/or fire. The power rating for the resistors we were using was 0.25 watts. When resistors are placed in series, their total value is added. In this example, 3 resistors of 10 would have a total resistance of 30. If we use the previous formulas, we get a value of 0.8 A for current and 19.2 W for power, or almost 77 times the power rating of the resistors. If the 10K resistors were used, we'd have a 0.8 MA for current and 19.2 MW for power, well within the power rating of the resistors. My friend, I, and a few other students tried to ask the teacher if those values were correct, and his answer, to no one's surprise, was, "No problems, just look in your textbook." I tried to argue that the textbook was plain wrong, and he shut me down, saying how way smarter people than him and I wrote the textbook, so we should just follow it. So everyone, some more reluctantly than others, placed the resistors in the breadboard, connected the power supply, and waited for his instruction to turn it on, as has been for the first 2 exercises without incident. Then he said to turn on the power supply, without even looking in the textbook. At first, everything seemed fine, and some people started to get their multimeters. A few seconds later, a girl screamed, "Fire!" but it was really only smoke. A few seconds later, and now we had small fires all over the lab and people freaking out. Nothing spectacular, and they died down a few seconds later, but enough to make most of the 30 people scream in panic, while the smell of burnt plastic from 15 breadboards and burnt ceramic from 45 resistors made the air pretty much unbreathable. To his credit, the teacher engaged the lab circuit breaker pretty fast and evacuated the room so no one breathed potentially toxic fumes. Since I was expecting it, I was more annoyed than scared, unlike some of the more sensitive people who were crying, and told the teacher, who was looking at the empty lab as if he was seeing ghosts, "There seems to be a problem. Should you look in the textbook now?" He gave a nervous laugh and said, "Maybe you're smarter than the people who wrote it." The screaming attracted a more experienced teacher who, after making sure everyone was okay, just couldn't stop laughing at our teacher. He did keep using his catchphrase, "No problems, just look in your textbook," until the end of the semester, but he was now also looking in the textbook himself and spotted a few glaring mistakes made by those intelligent people. For some reason, he didn't seem to like the nickname we gave him when we heard someone saying in the hallway, "Next is textbook idiots class." Okay, so I don't know anything about electricity and currents and watts and all of that, but I do know that science is an ever-evolving practice, and so these textbooks, they may be grounded in research and facts and things like that, but, new things are discovered. As technology evolves and advances, you find new things, so you can't really put too much stock into old textbooks, just in general. Illuminatus Prime commented, "When I got to the part that said he had already mentally checked out since he got a way better job lined up, I had a hunch this was going to be another classic malcomp, and I was right. You followed the teacher's instructions to follow the book's instructions, knowing the results would range from a quiet fail, at least, to a flaming disaster, at most, and you were right. I'm glad no one was physically injured, but why did no one pull the fire alarm? That would have really topped off the day." Our next story is, "Don't put the dishes away." Funny little story from when I was a kid. Mum's aunt was visiting, basically babysitting me and my sister, back when neither of us were in school yet. We'd all had lunch and the adults, coffee, but all the dirty dishes were still in the sink. Before Mum left to run her errands, she told her aunt not to put the dishes away. She left, we played some, my sister had a nap, and I probably sat somewhere reading or playing by myself. Auntie went to the kitchen. When Mum got back, we were all in the living room. She went to the kitchen and said, "What's with these dishes in the sink? It looks like they're all clean." Her aunt replied, "You told me not to put them away, so I washed them and put them back." Malicious compliance, miscommunication, who knows, but it's a funny story nonetheless. Realistic Expert 4772 replied, "LOL, years ago lived in an apartment building, laundry machines and basement. One tenant would put laundry in the washer or dryer and leave it there for hours. One day, that tenant used up 3 of 6 dryers. Clothes were dry. I needed the dryers. Yes, all 3. I took the tenant's stuff out, folded it nicely, left it on the folding table, dried my stuff, and then I put her folded laundry back into the 3 dryers. The doorman was a friend, and he told me that tenant was amazed there was a folding service. Doorman explained that tenant was lucky clothes didn't end up just piled on the folding table. Never found clothes left in the dryer too long again." Our next story is, "I stake my reputation on the fact we don't need any extra staff. Years ago, I was a union delegate for a hospital that underwent expansion. More services, more beds, an extra operating theater, etc. Before the expansion opened, the usual fight between the unions and management started over staffing. We went in really well prepared, and management took it well, offering staffing we wanted. We had a final meeting with about 40 people in the room, HR, department heads, and the various unions. We get to a department I will call ABC, and the department head says we don't need any extra staff except for nurses. I argued you have more space and more beds, and you need more cleaners, wardsmen, admin staff, etc. He fires back, quote, "I stake my reputation on it that we don't need any extra staff." I ask the minutes record this specifically. A meeting is set down for 4 weeks after the hospital expansion opening. We let him have his way, knowing he wouldn't be successful. Guess whose department turned into a complete farce? Nothing terrible, just lots of little issues. At the next union meeting, again with all people previously present, I read out the list of issues Department ABC has. I then read out the last minutes with him, stating they didn't need any extra staffing and that the department head had staked his reputation on it. I then asked the head of ABC to justify all this, and he couldn't. I asked him, as he staked his reputation on this and the outcomes have been poor, what does that mean? He gave no answer. I looked towards the CEO and said, "You were here last time, and the buck stops with you." He agreed to review the situation urgently. The union placed the hospital into formal industrial dispute at the meeting over the lack of staffing in Department ABC. The next day, the CEO sends out an email stating after a brief conversation with the head of Department ABC, he's chosen to seek different career opportunities. Well, you staked your reputation, you lost, and so yeah, there's nowhere to go but away. Positivity by me commented, "When a person following your orders asks for documentation that you said this, you should really think about what you're saying." Raw Meat Prophet replied, "I had a contractor trying to build things other than in the plans. He refused to let me send a RFI, request for information, used to clarify or ask to make changes with approval, to the engineer. I told him I'd send an email and you just reply saying you understand and accept all liability. He said, 'I'm not signing that,' and proceeded to not do what I was warning about. That time it actually worked." Our next story is, "Break health and safety no problem, and we won't work in the rain. Excellent." This is a two-parter. My initial malicious compliance probably contributed to the cause of the second, and it all happened roughly 2 years ago. I used to work for the local church as a groundskeeper and other odd duties. One of the odd duties was going upstairs to vac the open floor. It wasn't an odious job, but getting up in the very old, worn, and uneven stone stairs was a pain with a vac, brush, bucket, etc. One of the first times it happened, I noticed several of the brackets that held the thick rope, handrail, were either loose or came out completely if you weren't careful. I reported this and was told the parish council had known about it for 3 years. I kinda got annoyed about it at this point because if it came out when you had the vac on your back, it had a rucksack harness, and you slipped, it's a heck of a fall backwards. Not to mention the thousands of tourists that used to go up those steps. It could lead to serious injury. I also said that I was marking the date and any injury caused by the stairs I'd immediately advise H&S. I said to my immediate boss that I wouldn't be going up them until the issue was fixed. She seemed a bit shocked, but said she'd say something at the meeting. True to my word, when asked to go to clean, I refused. Weirdly, the issue was fixed within a month or so. Roll on a few months, and I was called into a meeting with the parish council's employee contact. Long story short, in the first, I was told my job was secure. I was asked to come in for a second meeting a month later, agreed at the time of the first meeting, and was told I was being laid off at the end of the year. This was August. I did win a discrimination case against them, but that's a different story and not malicious compliance. There's been an ongoing joke about the parish council saying we didn't have to work in the rain. I'd been asking for general work and rain gear since I started working there the previous year, but wasn't too bothered because I had plenty of old work clothes from previous jobs. After the employee contact informed me that I was being laid off and was unemployable, and a year of asking for rain gear, I'd had enough. So every time it even drizzled, I went inside. If it stopped, I came out. Thankfully, my colleagues were fine with this. They knew the score. As it was coming towards autumn, I did less and less work. I just sat with my feet up. This carried on until the end of October, where I just booked the rest of the year as holiday. Additional info. I was on a disabled work scheme via the government, so it was documented what I was and wasn't capable of. This also was adhered to even more strictly than before, and if any job even looked like it might fall under the umbrella of the if he thinks too much, he can say no rule. All in all, I helped my colleagues as much as needed, but my workload dropped massively as I started to go inside to avoid the rain and refused to do the jobs I didn't necessarily have to. Health and safety comes first, always, and the fact that they overlooked this, you were well within your grounds to maliciously comply and be petty in this scenario. I'm with you, OP. Sigwin commented, I'm assuming from the wording in some paragraphs this was in the UK. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, and let me know. Just because you Brits are not as likely to sue as us Americans doesn't mean it won't happen. 1 or 2 injured tourists could be devastating. OP replied to this, I'm British, but I live and work in the EU. I translated a few things so it would make sense. We actually do get a fair few Americans visiting the church, up to 2 or 3 coachloads a week at peak. The UK is getting as bad as the US for suing, to be honest. I know of one case where a 40-year-old woman returning to work after the kids grew up sued the sandwich chain she got a job at because she sliced her hand open on a bread knife. The reason behind the case was nobody told her the knife was sharp. The barrister I was talking with, who defended the chain, and me had a right laugh over that one. Our next story is, she thought I was working that day. I was, just not at that store. This is pretty complicated, so sorry, it's going to be long. TLDR at the bottom. In the early years of being a pharmacist, jobs in my city were hard to come by. I managed to get full-time hours by working for a couple of pharmacist friends at both of their stores. They would work out my schedule together and put an X on my schedule on the days I was at the opposing store. One store was downtown and one was in the suburb I lived in. At the suburb pharmacy, I had a coworker who could just not wrap her brain around the fact that if there was an X by my name, I was in fact working, just at the other store. Multiple times, I would have call after call on my cell phone and hang-ups on my answering machine at home because she wanted me to cover her shift at the suburb store when I was already working downtown. Worst thing was, my cell phone charged me for every single call, so after the second time of her pulling this, I would get downtown and immediately pull the battery off my phone. This made her angry at me for ignoring her, and we had a tepid relationship after that. Time went on, and the suburb store started expanding their nursing home operation, so I was able to work there full-time instead. I still had a great relationship with the downtown store, and they had me keep the keys in case of emergencies. They would occasionally come up, and the X would be on the schedule by my name. Sadly, Dee became the assistant manager and now thought she was the boss of me. Now, downtown pharmacist's daughter was getting married, and the suburb pharmacist was invited to all the festivities. I got scheduled to work the Thursday before at the downtown store. The X went by my name on the suburb schedule. I was also going to the wedding. I was good friends with the daughter, but missing the Mendy party on the Thursday I was working for her mom. I was on the phone with her on my break one time, and she was saying how sorry she was I was missing it, and I said, "Don't worry, I'll just doodle brown Sharpie all over my hands and pretend I was there when we aren't busy." Now, at that exact week, we were getting new pharmacy software downloaded. Nursing homes are run on a batch system where all the labels are run about 45 days before, and then all the bubble packs are made up during that time, and then the actual billing is done on the Thursday for the meds to be delivered Friday. Dee decided that she did not want the batch to be done and just wanted everything to be processed and made up on the Thursday for just this first week. My technician was freaking out, so I just told her to make up the usual drug cards: Lipitor, Aspirin 81, multivitamin, Altace, etc., without any patient data, just to help speed things along. Dee overheard and told the tech that she wasn't allowed to do that, and quote, "This younger generation is just scared of hard work." I panicked a bit because I was the only one of my age, Gen X, as all my coworkers were boomer-aged and older. I went and checked the schedule. Yep, there's an X by my name. I won't be there for the crap show, but somehow Dee thinks I am? Why should I tell her any different? Thursday rolls around, and at 12:30, my cell phone starts blowing up. It's in my purse on the safe because I don't get a lunch break, only pharmacists, and everyone can hear it. Out comes the battery. I get home after work, and they're screaming and swearing on my answering machine. A locum pharmacist worked the morning shift and wasn't instructed to do anything, so everything was left for Dee when she arrived at 12:30. She had to work late to finish over 500 prescription drug cards. I came in the next day and she's still furious. "You said you were working! I heard you talking about the effing Mindy thing!" I told her I was working, just not at that store, as evidenced by the X by my name. I learned then that she could eavesdrop on the break room from one place in the pharmacy when she herself was the only pharmacist working at the time. All my breaks were taken in my car after this. Goodness, what a mess. I think it's funny how the youngest person in this story, OP, is a Gen Xer, so this is like older people, boomers, silent generation, and Gen X just having a generational war. Goodness gracious, what a mess. Our next story is, just work on this one board. I worked at a contract manufacturing company that assembled and tested electronic PCBs for various other companies. They were big on keeping track of times and quantities to be able to properly charge for work done or to be within the quote. You'd be clocking in and out of different jobs as you finished a step or moved to a different product. Well, one day I was working on board XYZ that took only about 1 minute to function test. I would get 5 per tray about every 15 minutes. That leaves me with 10 minutes of idle hands, so I would work on board ABC that we already had a large quantity of on the test floor. So I would test boards ABC for a while and then test the XYZ boards after I got a few trays of them on the shelf. Boss says, "Why are you working on those boards? We need the XYZ boards to ship this week. Don't worry about the ABC boards," as if I already knew that XYZ were rushed or something. And I go, "I'm testing these boards quicker than they're giving them to me." Boss responds, "I don't care. Just get these dang boards done. That's all I care about. Don't work on anything else. I just want you to focus all your attention on these boards. We need to get them done." Malicious compliance time. Test for 5 minutes, wait for 10 minutes, for 8 hours. End of day comes. Boss goes, "How many XYZ boards did you get done today?" "About 160. "How long did that take you?" I'm a wise butt, so I already knew where this was going. "Of actually work?" "Yes." "A little over 2.5 hours. "What the heck did you do the rest of the day?" "Waited." "Why the heck did you do that?" "Remember when I said I was testing boards faster than I was getting them and you said to only work on those boards?" Boss gives a stupid ass face. "That's why." I couldn't honestly write like 10 more of these on this subreddit from working at that place. Some people never learn. Our next story is, we don't pay extra time if it's under 15 minutes. Okay, I can make it work. I was a software engineer for a company and out of nowhere they implemented an electronic control on our work time. Before that, we would work extra on good faith. If I had to do 2 more hours one day, the next day I could get in 2 hours later without a problem. In the new system, I had to clock in at 8 a.m. If I didn't, it would consider I was late and lose the entire first hour, and clock out at 5 p.m. with 1 hour lunch break. Work laws here in Brazil are different from the ones in the US and most of the posts here. If the company tracks your work time, they have to pay you extra time on anything over 40 hours per week. Sometimes I would get in a bit earlier, like 8:50 or something, and leave at 5:10 p.m. At the end of the first month, I was surprised my extra hours were 0. On the previous system, I wouldn't care, but they were the ones that decided to track this. I decided to do some digging on how the tracking software worked and found out that anything less than 15 minutes per check-in was completely ignored. 99% sure that was against the law, but I could work with that. From that day on, guess who arrived 16 minutes earlier every day? Came back from lunch 16 minutes earlier, if I was done and had nothing else to do, and left 16 minutes later. At the end of the second month, management called me in to explain why I had over 3 times more extra hours than most of the other workers. I just told them to check their system. I'm not the one keeping track of that anymore. To my surprise, they actually did pay everything that was owed. I could sue easily and win, and did not change how the system worked. I kept doing that for another 3 months before changing jobs to a remote one. I myself had a job like this many years ago, the whole 15 minutes rounding before and after your shift. Very flawed system, very lazy on behalf of payroll, but it can absolutely be taken advantage of if someone is savvy enough, and OP certainly was. Corin38 commented, "Inflexible systems are made to be broken. Nice to hear that the employer actually paid you afterwards." And Busted Tap replied, "For a while, our shop in the US would round to the nearest quarter hour. Arrive within 7 minutes or less of your clock-in, rounded to exact start time. But get there 8 minutes before, rounded to 15 minutes before your start time." Yeah, I may have gamed the system for a little while. Our next story is, no phones during work? Sure, try to find me then. This happened some months ago, and I remembered it while reading some of the posts here. So, I'm a forklift driver in a factory that produces chemical products for a building and construction, adhesives, sealants, cement, etc. My job basically consists in providing the workers with everything they need to continue production. My department produces adhesives, and my shift has circa 20 people, so I'm constantly moving back and forth between the warehouse, the department, and everywhere else we stock the materials. In the time this happened, our managers started to pressure us on the use of phones, which many people did use a lot, and some were really exaggerating with it. I used it in the slow moments or while I was waiting for something, obviously not while driving, and I had to keep it near me because the bosses needed to reach for me while I was away from the department for various tasks. They really became very strict on the use of phones, and a guy even got a formal complaint for it. 3 complaints in a single year gets you fired. Malicious compliance. I simply shut off the phone at the start of the shift and only turned it on while on break. Now, I didn't specify how big my workplace is. It's 1.4 million square feet, and sometimes it took me even 10 minutes to go where I needed to go and come back, and I received like 30 calls a day that were simply left unanswered. My managers were going mad, but they couldn't do crap because they imposed the rule. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call this malicious compliance, this is just compliance, and, if they have a hard time or issues with reaching you, then they need to come up with some kind of compromise that allows you to use your phone at work. White Particle commented, "Amazing how many companies want things both ways. No personal devices, but we require you to be reachable and to use multi-factor authentication." Zintin replied, "A company I worked for developed an app to track their inventory. I read the TOS. Red flags were, the app was user voluntary, and the second was, all damage to your personal device wasn't their liability. When I told my manager that I was not going to use it, he was livid. Good thing they had company-supplied devices I could use. They had only like 5 or 4 for the whole warehouse, though. Manager, go check the inventory on this item. Okay, I start walking for a device on the other side of the warehouse. Our next story is, no more VTO. So, long story short, my company got rid of voluntary time off last year. I've been with the company for 5 years and have always enjoyed going home early when there's no work to do. However, now we have to use PTO to go home early. I work 12-hour shifts and love to get some extra sleep. Plus, my current financial situation is very unique and I don't need the extra hours. For the last 2 days, I've been unable to do anything at work because of a work-related maintenance. I can't do anything at all, but I have to use PTO to go home? I have directly brought this up to the person in charge of allowing VTO, and they said that there's always something to do. I can't do anything because of maintenance. Cue malicious compliance. I've been sitting in the break room watching shows for 2 shifts in a row now. I'm on the 4th season of Righteous Gemstones, and I've only just started watching it, and have only seen it at work. Some people might think this is a dream to watch movies at work, but I would much rather be outside and get extra sleep than be stuck bored at work for 12 hours. Yeah, certain things you can't really put a price on. I myself would much rather be resting and rejuvenating and healing mentally than getting paid to do nothing on the clock. So yeah, I get the frustration there. FGC Clunk replied, I get it. It's not the dream job to get a job that you get paid for doing nothing. I worked for a company that pulled my project and had nothing for me to do instead. I ended up spending 3 months playing computer games on my personal laptop instead of writing software. I even told them that's what I would do until they gave me work to do, but I was bored for months until I quit. Our next story is, You're Only Here to Count. Hi everyone, I wanted to share a story from my job. I work at a place where we pack fruit. There are about 20 robots that fill boxes with fruit, and there's one position in charge of checking that each robot puts the correct amount of fruit in each box. To explain it a bit more, we basically have to check all day that the robots are doing a good job, making sure each box has the right amount of fruit and keeping track of which robot packed it. Hope that makes sense. Obviously, since it's heavy machinery, sometimes the robots damage the fruit. So when I'm checking a box, it's possible to find fruit that's been cut in half or otherwise damaged. When I first started, I was assigned to that checking position. It's pretty simple. Count the fruit in each box and return it to the export line. But whenever I found damaged fruit, I used to write it down in a section of the control log called comments, noting how many damaged ones I found. I also started reporting it to a woman from the quality team. She didn't like that. She kept telling me that it wasn't my job, which is technically true, but I thought it was important to say something when the damage was a lot. One day, all the robots started sending out fruit that was cut into multiple pieces. No idea how. So I went to report it again, and this woman confronted me and said, quote, "Your job is only to count. Count, 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 and count. That's it." She said it in a very rude tone and sent me back to the station. Of course, I thought, she's totally right. So instead of getting upset, whenever I found damaged fruit, I just counted it like a normal one, closed the box, and sent it down the export line. That's how I spent the whole day, just counting, nothing else, until the export inspection team noticed there was a lot of damaged fruit already packed and ready to go. The quality managers came to talk to me and asked why I hadn't reported it. I just pointed to the woman and said, she told me my job was only to count, and count, so that's all I did, and I shrugged. She started giving me hateful looks while the managers told her that this position does need to report damaged fruit and packaging issues. At the end of the day, they moved me to another area, a much better one, where I now do quality too, and this woman can't help but glare at me every time she sees me. Wasn't I just doing what I was told? Just counting? Yeah, I think at some point, common sense has to prevail over a power trip of telling someone what their job is and what they need to and not do. Obviously, damaged fruit is something that the company needs to know about, so even though technically it's not part of the job description, like, why wouldn't you want to know that information? Why wouldn't you want that reported? So yeah, totally justified here. Our next story is, I had my yard certified as a national wildlife habitat to spite a busy neighbor. Our yard is wild. I mean that in the real definition of living or growing in the natural environment. We have no lawn. We aggressively remove and prevent invasive and noxious species of plants and ensure that what grows is native to our area and drought resistant. The wildflowers that grow are things like lupine, blue flax, spiderwort, and black-eyed Susan, and sunflowers among others. We have natural elements like driftwood logs to retain water, and we even have an elk skull in the yard to act as a shelter for critters. There are a plethora of birds, bees, bunnies, and other wildlife. More wildlife than any yard in the area, as far as I can tell. It's beautiful and alive, but definitely not a manicured lawn with perfectly cut grass and landscaping. Last summer, we got a notice from the county that our yard was in violation of some county ordinance. My husband called the number on the notice and got a very over-it employee who let out a big sigh and said he had gotten like 30 complaints from one person for the entire strip of road that we live on. Keep in mind, you can't batch report an area. You have to file reports house by house. So someone had the time and energy to pull up Google Maps and file a report for about 30 houses for overgrown weeds. I checked the county ordinance and made sure everything we had in our yard was in compliance. Things like purposely cultivated, which our wildflowers definitely were. We planted specific species of seeds and we remove whatever's not native. None of the wild plants block any sidewalks, nor do they hang over onto any other properties. Now knowing that it was someone with way too much time on their hands, I did some reading and learned that my yard has everything needed and then some to qualify as a national wildlife habitat. So I filled out the form, paid the fee, and got my certificate. My husband called the county employee back, who said, "Send me that certificate." He looked it over, thanked my husband for the new information he can use in the future, and closed our case. I now have signs on my yard that announce the property as a wildlife habitat, and the birds and bees get to keep living happily in the wild. Not gonna lie, this is pretty impressive. I kind of want to see this yard, not just because it's a national wildlife habitat, but the way that it was described just sounds totally beautiful and tranquil and peaceful. So I don't know why any bitter neighbor would want to destroy that, but it sounds like OP got what they wanted in the end, and gladly so. DH Gott commented, NPR ran a story years ago about a woman from Arizona who pulled up her grass and returned her yard to a native desert condition. She was told by the county to remove that trash and plant a green lawn. She took her fight to City Hall and eventually won. Our next story is, I wore a suit to work and got my supervisor demoted. I'm posting mainly because I'm not a passive-aggressive type, and I'm in disbelief that this actually worked. Ever since I started at my job a few months ago, my supervisor, we'll call him Josh, has been micromanaging me. When I'm the subject of criticism, which is often, I try to give him the benefit of the doubt and ask him to clarify. What are your expectations? What specifically should I have done differently? Josh's responses are always vague, often something to the effect of, just do better. I even had a meeting with Josh and HR to discuss this, but to no avail. Yesterday, Josh comes to my desk to tell me I need to dress better. Now, I work at a small company, and the vibe is unusually casual. A not insignificant number of people come to work wearing jeans, hoodies, t-shirts, and/or baseball caps. I've never worn a hat to work, and I make a point of wearing a button-up shirt with a collar every day. This particular day, I was wearing a long-sleeve button-up flannel, chino pants, and Adidas Gazelles. Other days, I wear loafers and dress shirts that are tucked in. So I asked Josh to clarify. Should I be wearing dress shoes, dress shirt, tucked in? What specifically do you want me to change? Josh tells me I just need to dress better and that I should talk to HR for clarification. So I go into HR and ask, what is the dress code? I get a standard answer: pants, closed-toed shoes, no sleeveless shirts, etc. I ask, have I ever worn anything to work that poses a problem? HR says, no, you're fine. Because I'm mad, and because my repeated efforts to resolve this kind of problem had gone unheeded, I decided to be petty. The next day, today, I showed up to work in a full suit. It's one I keep for events like weddings, so it's fitted and I look really sharp in it. It's also wildly and conspicuously overdressed for the office I work in. I had several interactions with people coming to my desk to comment on my outfit and ask what the occasion was. When anyone asked, only if they asked, I told them I had been told to dress better. This was always met with disbelief and incredulity. 2 people even said they liked the way I dress normally. When anyone asked me who the order came from, again, only if they asked, I told them it came from Josh. I was expecting to pull my little stunt for a week just to prove a point, and then go back to wearing what I had been wearing before. Word got around the office fast, apparently, because the CEO, Josh's direct boss, came to my desk later in the day to tell me I would be reporting to him now, and that he'd be having a talk with Josh about this and other issues. It's important to note that I was Josh's only underling, so he effectively went from being a supervisor to just a regular employee. I'm on a bit of a high now. I think I'm going to come into work tomorrow wearing a different one of my flannels. There seems to be some deep-seated jealousy or envy here that's not fully being touched upon by Josh. So yeah, he gets his comeuppance, and wear what you want to work as long as it's appropriate and according to the very lax dress code. I Got Fancy Pants replied, this reminds me of a true story my husband told me. This would have taken place in the 1950s. His childhood best friend's father was a skilled machinist. That can be mentally exciting, but sometimes a dirty job. So the guys wore casual clothes to the shop. He had done this work for decades and liked the job. One day, when he was in his 50s, he simply decided he was tired of always dressing in casual clothes. Life is too short for that, he decided, and he had several nice suits that he wore only to church, weddings, and funerals. Why not wear them all the time? So he began wearing suits to the shop every day. His coworkers were confused, but just shrugged and went about the work. It threw management into a tailspin, however. It made them uncomfortable in some undefinable way. Finally, at a loss as to how to handle this sartorial crisis, they promoted him to management. Mr. E, gone but not forgotten. Our next story is Confetti It Is Then. This story happened over a decade ago, when my city was starting up a must-use-this bin for trash and a recycle bin will be provided as well schemes. My roommates and I got the notice for this new changeover, and we were reading the requirements and such. We all noticed one glaring thing. All paper products must be loose and not bagged. This included shreds. My friends and I discussed this and talk about how dumb it is, etc. And then the new phone books started showing up. Cue bright idea. We then started asking at work, friends, family, neighbors, etc., if they had anything they needed to shred and if we could have their phone books. I mean, even at this point, no one used them anyways. We had literal piles of phone books and papers, envelopes, and anything else paper we could run through our shredders. I think it took a few weeks for us to manage to get through all the phone books we had, and if I recall correctly, we killed at least one shredder. In the end, we had like 4 30-gallon trash bags full of shreds, cross-cut confetti-sized shreds, which we then lovingly packed into the recycle bin, full to the top and slightly packed. Then trash day comes. Unfortunately, I worked nights, so I didn't get to see the dumping of the shreds, but upon waking, I knew it was a glorious occasion. Shreds everywhere. I would imagine that we were not the only ones with this bright idea, as a few weeks later, a notice showed up, stating that the rules had been amended, all shreds were to be bagged in clear plastic trash bags. Gosh, I can only imagine the mess. You cannot pay me any sum of money to clean up paper shreds from all over the neighborhood after garbage day. Yikes. Mother of the World 2 commented, "My city does not allow shredded paper in the recycle bin at all. No shredded paper. We cannot put plastic bags in that bin and a list of other plastics that cannot be recycled. So my shredded paper gets bagged and in the trash bin, as that's the only other option, and that all goes to the landfill. Dumb, I know." Our next story is, send out defective parts? Okay. Years ago, I was head of quality control for a major partner company that built transmission parts for a big US automaker that started with F. My job at that company consisted of daily audits and testing of parts to make sure they met specifications and functioned correctly. One of the testing procedures was a machine that would test the parts to ensure they rotated 360 degrees without catching or getting stuck, and they either passed or failed. Failed parts would get reworked, of course. For the first year of the job, B was great, and I took pride in it because if you're spending over 50 grand on a new car, you'd want it to work properly, right? Well, after a year, the plant manager and CEO of the partner company came up to me one day and said that we would no longer be doing the rotation test. I was surprised because, for one, any changes in procedure have to be approved by F, and second, my written work instructions at the station had to be changed out, updated, and stamped with approval, which was standard procedure anytime work instructions were updated. The work instructions would also have to be reviewed by F. They told me not to worry about it and just stop testing the parts and to just pack them up and ship them. I definitely sensed a crap storm coming because we did unfortunately have a high defect rate, and without this test process, 30% of the parts the customer received would be bad. But cue malicious compliance. Within a month, the results were clear. We were getting many complaints about bad parts, and parts were being returned at an alarming rate. Some higher-ups from F even did a walkthrough to try and see what the issue was, and that's when they noticed that they weren't testing the parts before sending them out anymore. I was called into the conference room later that day for a meeting with the plant manager, the CEO, and the higher-ups from F. The plant manager and CEO looked furious, and I knew they were going to put the blame on me, but I was prepared. Plant manager goes, "OP, the reason we called you here is because it was brought to our attention you aren't testing the parts before sending them out anymore. Is there a reason for this?" he said with a smug look. And I say, "Yes, you said not to test them anymore and to just send them out." And the CEO says, "That's not true. We never said that." I then proceeded to pull out the paper they mindlessly signed. "Here's the agreement you signed saying I'm not responsible for any bad parts getting sent out and how we're no longer testing them." The plant manager and CEO's faces both went pale, and I then gleefully handed the paper to the higher-ups from F. I was then asked to leave the room, and on my way out, I handed my 2 weeks' notice to the plant manager because I knew this company was screwed and had another job lined up. Long story short, they lost their contract with F and got sued for $3 million. The company shut its doors, and last I heard, they filed for Chapter 3 bankruptcy. I don't know what happened to the building or anyone else that worked there, and I don't even care, but I do know F had a major part shortage for a while after this. And this, dear viewers, is why you need to have a paper trail and document everything. And when you sign things, know what you're signing, because someone out there is gonna use that against you, like OP Soki did here. Avid Learner Bot commented, "The fact that company execs would recklessly sign off on abandoning quality control checks only to see their reckless gamble blow up in their faces, it's just stunningly irresponsible, and I can't help but wonder how many other corporations are harboring similar dangers within their ranks." And OP replied to this, "This has happened at pretty much every company I've worked at. Higher-ups make stupid decisions and it always backfires." Walking Trisani commented, "This is what happens when you let the free market regulate itself and refuse to force companies to take responsibility as they should with proper regulations, which is one of the many reasons why many US companies have so much success in the US but fail miserably as soon as they set foot in the EU or anywhere regulations, including workers' rights, exist. As soon as regulations are being applied as they should, the sharks have orcas coming for them in the form of healthy competition, regulators, and unions. I'm not saying this kind of thing never happens in the EU, but oh boy are the higher-ups getting their proper FAFO moment way more easily than they would without regulations." Our next story is, "We don't use track changes here." When I started working with a particular company, my boss, Wallace, absolutely hated using track changes, and he didn't allow anyone to use them. "We do not use track changes here," he told me profoundly on my first day. This meant that we had to type and print everything, go next to him on his desk, and he would correct our work using any medium which was within reach. Pencil, blue ink, purple ink, coal, a squid, whatever. This led to infinite asterisks, up arrows, down arrows, speech bubbles, etc., and countless misunderstandings and mistakes which wasted everyone's time and basically frustrated everyone. Some people raised it to higher-ups, but to no avail. I tried to convince him twice to use track changes by listing all the benefits, etc. On the third try, he snapped at me and shouted at me in front of everyone, "Didn't I freaking tell you that we don't use track changes here?" I remained standing up and loudly and calmly apologized in front of everyone and agreed with him that track changes are unnecessary and I will never ever use them again. Then I picked up my faintest and messiest pen and scribbled my answers, comments, and suggestions in reply to his feedback with something as close to a love child between wingdings and hieroglyphics as possible, on a 50-page urgent document, using asterisks and PTOs and everything I could think of. I left the document on his desk while he was in a meeting and cheerfully went home. The next morning, we found an email from Wallace, timed at 10:30 p.m., requesting us to start using track changes immediately. At the end of that day, following my coworker's treatment, I understood why superheroes join the Avengers. Gotta be satisfying to prompt an abrupt, sudden 180 from boss man like that. Good for you. Mean Security replied, "My boss does not appear to understand track changes. Today, he changed a paragraph to all strike-through." Dude. And Titania T-Rex added, "We get that all the time. It's annoying as heck when we have to run the documents through the software that strikes the deleted items. We have to delete all the strike-through items, then run the document back through the software. So annoying." Our next story is, "Pipe exploded on the weekend, but hey, at least we saved on overtime." In 2006, I worked as a maintenance technician in a small office building. My job was to make sure everything works properly. Air conditioning, plumbing, electricity, all that stuff. Then we got a new boss from some big corporate office, and he was obsessed with cutting costs. First week, he tells us all, in a very serious voice, "From now on, absolutely no overtime, no matter what, no exceptions." We all kind of looked at each other like, is he serious? So Friday afternoon, around 4:30 p.m., I get an alert from the boiler room. Pressure in one of the water pipes is very high. I check it and the pipe is vibrating like crazy. I know if we don't release the pressure or fix it, it's going to explode. I go to the boss and tell him, "This pipe is dangerous. I need maybe 1 to 2 hours overtime to fix it tonight." He looks at the clock and says, "It's past 5 soon. No overtime. We'll handle it Monday." "Okay, boss. No problem." So I go home. Saturday morning, I get a call from the security guy who works weekends. He's freaking out. "Water is pouring out of the boiler room. It's flooded in the hallway. What do I do?" I laugh and I say, "Too late. Nothing we can do now. Perhaps swim?" On Monday, the boss walks in and smells wet carpet and disaster. Half the ground floor is underwater. Documents ruined, IT equipment drowned, rest in peace. He comes to me angry. "Why didn't you stop this?" I just say, "You told me no overtime. Pipe didn't want to wait till Monday." Cleanup costs thousands, and guess what? From that day, boss never said no to overtime again. In fact, from then on, when we reported just an inkling of a suspicion that something might be wrong, he simply said, "Do what you have to do. Just don't tell me the hours." Sometimes pipe is the best teacher. Yeah, if you have an impending major issue like this, I don't care what your policies are, that needs to be addressed immediately, especially if it's on a Friday. You're not going to put off a potentially busted pipe until Monday. That's just poor management. Shadow Dragon 8685 replied, "You can schedule maintenance downtime, or your equipment can schedule the maintenance without telling you. You had the very rare butter zone intersection where the equipment scheduled the maintenance but actually gave you a few hours notice." Up to no good 13 replied, "I'm an industrial inspector. Tanks, pressure vessels, piping, etc. When I find things in questionable condition, I'll often get asked, well, how long can we go before repairing or replacing? My mantra is, a planned shutdown is cheaper than an unplanned shutdown. Every single time." Our next story is, punishing me for underperforming for 1 day in 2 years? No problem. Hello everyone, I'll try to be concise. Background. I work at a company where I handle mid to high level complaints to managers, PR and legal. My daily requirement is 40 cases handled per day. There are some of my team colleagues that struggle with this, but I don't, and I don't feel lazy to stop at 40. So I've handled 50 to 55 basically every day for the past 2 years. There's no bonus or even recognition for this. I just did it because I felt a friendly obligation to the company. Complaints can be a 5-minute resolution or a 2-hour Zoom call with our New York lawyers. It's a gamble, really. The event. Recently, I had a day where I felt a bit sick and, at the same time, had bad luck of getting only very hard cases that required more time. So I had 39 cases, one under the requirement. I thought nothing of it, as my weekly average way off the charts, 50 plus as usual. The very next day, I felt better and went back to my usual high numbers. Come Monday, I had an emergency one-on-one with my manager where I was informed that I had to attend a 3-day workshop seminar on how to best meet requirements because I underperformed last week. My jaw dropped, and I asked, don't they count the weekly, monthly, and yearly numbers? To which I was told that the daily requirement is 40, and this is standard practice, nothing we can do. Basically, it was a workshop for underperformers who had 20 to 30 out of 40 cases daily. It was nothing hard, but I did need to drive there for 3 days after work and listen to HR guys giving bad advice, as they never actually handled the cases in real life, and I had to talk about what I will do to improve my numbers and reach the 40, as the nonsense HR calls it. This made me lose hours and hours of my free time, and I was livid. After it was over, I had a long think, and I decided that I will do exactly that. I will reach the 40, and that's it. The aftermath. For the past few months, I go into work, I handle 40 cases, my daily requirement, and then I do nothing for the rest of my shift. I've had multiple one-on-ones with my manager during this time, and I'm constantly asked, is something wrong? To which I naively reply, no. Am I in trouble? Am I underperforming? And then, of course, they say that I'm 100% within daily requirements, and that way I shut the conversation down. This is real life, so I can't really say a clever comeback or something like that, but I do keep playing the fool that has no idea what's wrong now. But I find satisfaction in knowing that they got used to my overachieving and are now suffering for the lack of it. Before Easter, they put up an internal ad for promoting another 2 managers, so my guess is how that's the number of people they will now need to pay extra, just because they lost me as an overachiever, and they lost me for no reason other than their own stupidity. Thank you all. I hope I did not bore you. Yeah, this sounds pretty consistent with just the current state of the workforce. Working extra really doesn't get you any extra favor in the grand scheme of things. It gets taken for granted. And heaven forbid you do anything below what they're accustomed to you doing, which is overachieving. And, they'll take a bite out of your butt for it. So good on you for realizing this and scaling back, OP. They clearly don't appreciate you. Loco8765 replied, "They give you a class on how to reach the 40, so you're applying what you were taught. Also an example of bad metrics ill-used." Gelatin Ghost replied, "Businesses pretending they're data-driven usually just means they're too lazy to apply common sense. Instead, they micromanage employees with almost arbitrarily chosen metrics without thought. They deserve malicious compliance and the resulting loss of market share." Our next story is, "You're not paid to think." Okay, so I didn't. A few years ago, I worked as a copywriter at a small PR agency run by a tyrant of a boss. Let's call her Marcy. She was all about control. One day, during a strategy meeting, I pointed out a huge flaw in a campaign that could have cost our client major money. Her response? "You're not paid to think. You're paid to write what I tell you." Cool, got it. From that point on, I followed her instructions exactly. No suggestions, no edits, no heads up when things were obviously going sideways. Just pure, flawless compliance. Within 2 months, 2 major clients left over tone-deaf campaigns. Ones I had tried to fix but was explicitly told not to. Guess who got blamed? Me. Guess who kept receipts? Also me. I forwarded my "just doing what you told me" email chain to HR. Turns out, this wasn't the first complaint. She was restructured out of the company 3 weeks later. Edit. Sorry for using a hyphen. Apparently, that's a no-no. Said it before, I'll say it again, I'll keep saying it. Keep paper trails of everything. Document every conversation that you have with someone that you may potentially have an issue with down the line, and this is why. According Register 73 commented, "Early in my career, I had a manager who would give me reports or letters to type up on multiple scraps of paper, often stapled or pinned together, with post-it notes and strips of scrap paper attached with additions and helpful notes like insert yellow post-it here when there were 6 or 7 yellow post-its attached. She was awful at checking herself, would put wrong or impossible dates, wrong names for people, etc. I always managed to make something of the mess, whether it was a letter or report, but one day I'd interpreted a note incorrectly or put it in the wrong place. She went off it and dressed me down in front of clients, insisting I should just do what she says from now on. So I did. One report was in such a state it was escalated to a higher manager. She'd submitted it without proofing it, of course. We were called into a meeting, and when asked, she blamed me for all the mistakes. I remember one date was April 31st, and the big boss's name was incorrectly spelled at least once. I'd brought with me the pile of crepe I'd been given, post-its and pinned notes and all. He stabbed himself on a dressmaking pin, just as I'd done loads of times before. I'd also brought the memo where she'd previously told me not to correct anything she'd submitted. I don't know what was exactly said to her afterwards, but soon after, I was successful in getting another job in a different department. She wasn't given a replacement, and anything she needed went to the central admin team to sort out instead. Daft thing is, she was actually a nice woman. We'd been friendly before we worked together, but she was an awful manager with no clue about getting the best work out of people. Affectionate Fig 9277 replied, "If only managers came with a bit of humility. I think a lot of people would take incompetence to an extent if it came with proper communication. Maybe your manager was really good at certain things and this was just her one blind spot. She could have recognized that and said, 'Gee, according Register 73, I know this is a mess. Can you do anything with it?' and then answered any question you may have had. But no, managers can't admit their limitations. They're so much better than the rest of us actually doing the work." Okay, everybody, that is all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and comment down below. And if you want to check out any of our other videos, click the video on the right. All that said, I will see you next time.